I'm joined here on TVP World today by the EU Ambassador to Georgia, Paweł Herczyński. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, has the EU developed an official stance when it comes to the foreign agents bill here in Georgia that is potentially, most certainly going to be passed?
We have been loud and clear last year when similar bill was introduced. Last year, under the pressure from international community as well from population of Georgia, this bill has been unconditionally withdrawn. Unfortunately, this year, the ruling majority has decided again to introduce this bill, and we have been very swift in our reaction, both in private and in public, trying to explain that this bill is incompatible with EU norms and EU values, and that Georgia, as a candidate country, should not have such type of legislation. We have asked for this bill to be withdrawn, and there is still a possibility for this to happen.
Speaking with some government officials just a couple weeks ago, they were trying to support this bill by saying that it's very similar to an EU directive that they were given, essentially, that are a similar law that has been passed in many European countries. How does this law differ from the EU directive?
This is not correct. In fact, there are discussions in Brussels about a future directive on defending democracy. These are only discussions, so we will see what will be the end result. But the future directive will focus on something completely different. This is about foreign disinformation and foreign information manipulation. This is about other countries, undemocratic countries, paying for lobbying in their interests. It would not focus on civil society organizations. It would focus also on companies, on individuals. So the idea is very different, and this comparison is not correct.
Have you noticed a change in the rhetoric from the government officials concerning this foreign agents bill over time, especially over the last month or so?
Well, the government is trying to make sure that this bill is finally adopted. It went through 3 readings in Parliament. This was happening in an atmosphere of mass protests. So it's not only condemnation from outside, but also people of Georgia going to the streets and protesting against this bill, because people understand that in case this legislation is enacted, this will seriously hamper Georgia's path towards EU membership. So there is still a chance, there is still a possibility that the president will veto the bill, and the president also has a possibility to provide an alternative. And in fact, there is a still possibility that this bill will not be enacted, that it will be after the presidential veto voted down. And this is what we would like Georgia to do in case Georgia wants to continue its path towards EU membership.
There has been somewhat of negotiation. I'm sure you just mentioned that you've talked to the government both publicly and privately about taking this bill down. We saw the foreign ministers come from some EU countries recently, spoke to the rallies, so also speaking to the government privately and publicly. Do you think that's had any effect on the government and its thinking concerning this law?
I hope it will. I hope that, as last year, also this year, the ruling majority will reconsider its position and will not put into a question an amazing, historic opportunity for Georgia to become a member of the European Union. This is truly a paradox, and I'm saying this also not only as an EU diplomat, but also a Polish diplomat, that, for many years, Georgia was knocking to the door of European Union. The doors were closed. Enlargement, especially eastwards, enlargement of European Union has been always a very divisive topic among EU member states. Finally, and paradoxically, also thanks to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the doors to eastwards enlargement of European Union have been wide opened. Ukraine, Moldova are pushing fast forward, and Georgia, who used to be the front runner among the three countries for many years, now has second thoughts, has hesitations. Even worse, there is intimidation, there are threats, there is violence that we have condemned very strongly. It's absolutely unacceptable. And I sincerely hope that under the pressure not only coming from the international community, but first and foremost from the people of Georgia, you see those demonstrations every single day. Rain and shine. People are there because they feel that this is a unique opportunity that cannot be wasted. And they know that in case this legislation goes ahead, this will be a serious obstacle on Georgia's path towards EU membership.
Certainly. Now, as your time here as ambassador, how would you say, I mean, would you say this whole law is a coincidence? They took it down last year after these massive protests. They said that they weren't going to bring it back. In December, Georgia gets candidate status again. Is this a coincidence in the timing? Is there something more that we can infer about Russian influence on this current government?
Look, I have no doubt that Russia, in spite of the fact that they are so busy trying to destruct Ukraine, they have not forgotten about South Caucasus. Georgia, former Soviet Republic, has been always considered by Russia as being in its sphere of influence, something that we as Western world strongly reject. For sure, there is pressure, maybe even hybrid activities on part of Russia. Please don't forget that 20% of Georgia's territory is occupied by Russia. You have Russian military bases 50 kilometers from where we speak now, from the capital of Georgia, Tbilisi. Actually, the whole breakaway regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, Georgian regions that are occupied by Russia, all these so-called frozen conflicts have been created by Russia 30 years ago precisely in order to complicate and derail aspirations of newly independent former Soviet countries. So I have no doubt that Russia is trying to do everything it can in order to complicate, derail, and hamper Georgia's trajectory towards the West.
And also, in your experience here as ambassador, the opposition seems a bit weak and fragmented right now. Do you think that this is a polarizing force in Georgia which could affect the outcome of the next elections?
Look, Georgia is not the only polarized country. Georgia is a democracy. It's a young democracy, but it is a democratic country. You have many different political parties, and in October this year, there will be parliamentary elections. Actually, the electoral campaign is already ongoing, and we will see how the population will vote. Of course, as an EU ambassador, I cannot take sides, but what I can assure you of is that we, as European Union, we are trying to work with every democratically elected government. We used to work with the previous governments, we work with the current government, and we will be working with whatever government will be democratically elected in October.
Certainly, and as long as we don't witness, I guess if we don't witness continued violence against protesters, if this bill does get forced through and becomes law, will there be an EU response? I've heard talk about potentially sanctions, whether they be financial or travel sanctions, on members of the government if democracy and human rights are violated continuously, and I believe this bill gets forced through as law?
We have been working very hard in order to be in a more for more formula with Georgia. However, in case this law, which contradicts EU norms and EU values, is enacted, we will have no choice but to move to less for less formula of cooperation between EU and Georgia. This will be truly regrettable. And as European Union, we will do our utmost in order not to let this happen, not to enter into a negative spiral of events. We will have no choice but to focus not only on carrots but also on sticks. Unfortunately, probably most of those sticks would actually make life of ordinary Georgians difficult. But we are not yet there. There is still a window of opportunity, and we still hope that we will manage to preserve and to keep this more for more approach that is beneficial to Georgia, and it's also beneficial to the European Union.
And finally, Mr. Ambassador, do you believe that this year will be a pivotal year in the direction that Georgia chooses for its future?
Georgia is at the crossroads. We all know this, and I sincerely hope that Georgians will make right decisions now concerning this law, and then later on the 26th of October when they will have parliamentary elections.
All right, well, we'll be looking forward to that. Ambassador Herczyński, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.